Crissy, and I am from the Chattanooga Public Library. And today we have a very special guest with us. So, special guest, introduce yourself.
I'm Mr. Shober. I teach science at Brainerd High School.
And today for our STEM activity, we are going to be doing a baking experiment. So, Mr. Shober is going to lead us in the program, and I'm going to do it.
The supplies that we're going to need for our baking experiment are 2 cups of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon baking powder, not baking soda. They're different, and we'll talk about that in a minute. 1 tablespoon of granulated sugar, 1 teaspoon of salt, 6 tablespoons of unsalted butter. And if you don't have unsalted butter, that's okay. If you just have salted butter, then you'll just add less salt later on. And then last of all, we'll need 3/4 of a cup of whole milk. So the tools that we'll need are an oven, obviously, a baking sheet, some measuring spoons and measuring cups, a large mixing bowl to mix everything up, and a knife to cut the butter. Okay, so what we need to do, we're gonna butter our baking sheet, and that will help our baked goods to not stick. So go ahead and put your butter in the freezer, and then when you're done with that, you can preheat your oven to 425 degrees. We are going to actually make the same thing 3 different times, but we're going to do it a little bit different each time. And we're going to change one thing each time, and that's going to let us compare what effect that one thing has. Our first trial, what you need to do is get your mixing bowl, and you're going to combine 2/3 of a cup of flour, 1 teaspoon of sugar, and 1/2 teaspoon of salt in the mixing bowl. Stir up what you've got there. What you're going to do now is you're going to go get your butter that's nice and cold from the freezer. Take your butter and you want to chop off 2 tablespoons worth. Go ahead and put the big block back in the freezer. So next, we don't want to just stick our cube of butter in there. That's not going to do any good, right? That's going to be not a very well mixed treat. So we have 2 options here. If you have a box grater, you can use that to grate your butter into your bowl. Or if you don't have one, just use your knife to chop the butter into small little slices. So we're thinking maybe like the size of a grain of rice. That is, we probably ought to take that paper off. Add 1/4 of a cup of milk. We need to use whole milk. You know, if we were to use skim milk, we're not going to have the right amount of fat, which in science we call lipids. Whole milk, it basically has more fat in it than skim milk or 2% milk. But if you don't have any other options, you could try it, and then you could let us know how your final product ends up, and we'll, just count that in our science. So, I think we're ready now to make some dough. So, Crissy, what you need to do is use a spatula or a wooden spoon or something to mix up all of our mix there. In fact, if you wanted to use one of your measuring spoons, you could probably use that also. We do want to get everything mixed together and kind of evenly spread out. It's okay if there's still some clumps of butter. In fact, it's good to have like the little, tiny clumps of butter kind of spread around in there. But what we don't want to do is overwork it. We don't, because we want things to stay cold. So it should be starting to stick together. And as we start working with it, it is going to warm up a little bit, which is fine. That's going to happen. Let's go on to our next step. Okay, so once things are mixed together pretty good and it's kind of sticking together, kind of like a glob of Play-Doh, we are going to take it out, but not yet, because we need to get our surface ready before we take it out. Crissy has a nice wooden butcher block here to work on, and she's going to sprinkle some flour onto it. What that flour is going to do is just help keep the dough from sticking to everything, like the board, hands. So once she's got a nice layer of flour there, what she's going to do is just go ahead and take the dough out of her mixing bowl, and she's going to start kind of working it a little bit with her hands, just kind of smushing it together. And if it's still really sticky, she can add some more flour. start folding it in half. Very good, and then kind of push down on that. All right, now what you're gonna do is you're gonna turn it 90 degrees, or, you know, and you can turn either way, it doesn't really matter. Beautiful, just like that. And now what you're gonna do is the same exact thing. If you need to flatten it out a little bit more, you can, but you're gonna fold it over on itself, just like you did before. All right, there's number 2. We do 5 times total. So we just did it twice, so we can turn it again and fold. That makes number 3. And turn it again, very good. And fold, very good. And one more time. All right, on some flour, get it. And there's number 5. Okay, good. So we are almost done with this trial. What you need to do now is you're going to use your hands again to kind of shape it into about a 1-inch thick layer. If you're not sure how big an inch is about the same as 1 knuckle here on your finger. Okay, so if we were to cook this just as it is now, that's going to be one pretty big baked item. So what we might want to do is split it in half. I think we are about done with round 1. So what you're going to do now, take your circular shapes and you're going to place them on the left baking sheet that you made. Now the reason that it's important to keep track of which ones go where is because remember each set is going to be a little bit different and we want to be able to keep track of, you know, what did we do to these ones, and so when we look at the final product, we'll be able to say, these ones that didn't have any baking soda were, you know, whatever we end up finding at the end. Take your baking sheet and just set it in your refrigerator. And basically now we're going to do almost the exact same thing 2 more times. This time what's going to be different is we are also going to add 1 teaspoon of baking powder.
Ooh, my baking powder has this awesome lip on it that I can level out.
Mix them up a little bit, and then we're going to need to add our butter, just like we did before. So again, that was 2 tablespoons of butter. We'll get our baking sheet, and this time we're going to put these 2 in the middle so we can keep track of which one's which.
I only have a small baking pan, so I might grab my other one and do the same thing.
Sure. The important thing is to make sure we keep track of what's on what side and what's on the other side, right? So it looks like for what we have so far in your small baking pan, we have trial 1 is on the left, trial 2 is on the right, or your second pan will have trial 3. So we're going to do the same, mix everything up again, and so that is 2/3 of a cup of flour, 1 teaspoon of sugar, 1/3 teaspoon of salt. So we're going to do 2 teaspoons of baking powder. Okay, so we are finishing up with round 3 here.
This one definitely feels different.
Interesting observation. What feels different about it?
It's seemingly like staying together better, but it's also like whenever I try to like flatten it out, it kind of
doesn't want to flatten out.
Yeah, it kind of bounces back up.
Interesting. Our oven should be set at 425. If you started it heating up when we started cooking, then it should definitely be warmed up by now. So what we can do is go ahead and put our little trays in the oven, and we are going to set a timer for 12 minutes. Our baked items should be a nice golden brown Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the science that's happening when we cook something with baking powder. You might have always been wondering what's the difference between baking powder and baking soda. Baking powder actually has baking soda in it. So baking powder is a mix of a base, which in this case is baking soda, a weak acid, and a starch. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, baking powder has acid in it and we're eating it. That can't be healthy for us, right? Well, it turns out that we actually eat a lot of different weak acids and they're perfectly fine. In fact, they're good for us. Weak acids are the same, just like water is good for you, right? But if you were to try to drink like 3 bajillion gallons, it probably would not be great. But just some other examples of weak acids are lemon juice has citric acid in it. Soda all have carbonic acid. Cheese has sorbic acid in it. Milk has lactic acid in it. And vinegar has acetic acid in it. So those are all things that you've probably eaten before and they all have acid. Baking soda, the chemical name is sodium bicarbonate. And so from that name, we can tell that we've got sodium, that's Na, hydrogen is H, C for carbon, O for oxygen. Here we have the sodium and the bicarbonate. And our sodium bicarbonate molecule would look kind of like, most baking soda is going to use phosphoric acid. And phosphoric acid looks kind of like this molecule over here. And it's going to have some hydrogen, some phosphorus, and some oxygen. We're not super familiar though with phosphoric acid. We don't really use it in any other situation. But as far as the chemistry is concerned, it's pretty similar to something that you are familiar with, which is acetic acid, which we can find in vinegar. And so acetic acid is a little bit different formula here, CH3COOH, or we could write that a different way, it means the same thing over here. But the key thing here is that we've got some hydrogens that can fall off. And we'll see why that's important when we look at our reaction. We look here, this is our baking soda, this is our vinegar, and you might have done this experiment before, right? So when you mix baking soda and vinegar, they fizz up and make lots of bubbles. When you mix the baking soda and the vinegar, they kind of rearrange the molecules a little bit. You can see the Na came off the baking soda, joins up with the other part over here, and we end up with this stuff, H2CO3. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but just so we can see here, baking soda plus vinegar, we're going to make carbonic acid, which is in soda, we already knew that, and sodium acetate, which could be used to give salt and vinegar flavor to potato chips, or we use it in little reusable heating pads because it actually gives off a lot of heat. That is in soda, so that actually is what makes your soda fizzy. And so we're going to need to talk about our second reaction here. So we have our carbonic acid, and carbonic acid is not very stable, so it's not going to stay as carbonic acid for very long. And it's pretty quickly going to turn into two things that we might recognize here, CO2, which is carbon dioxide, and H2O, which is water. But here's why this is important. When you have a soda or something, those CO2 bubbles form gas. That's what you're seeing when you whoosh, unscrew the top of your soda bottle and you see all the bubbles rise up to the top. And those bubbles are trapped in the surroundings, and so they make a foam, and that's what takes up all the space and gives you a volcano if you're trying to do that experiment, or makes your soda overflow if you shook it up too much. But in the case of our baking, they're going to take up space inside of our little baked good and make it kind of expand up a little bit. So if we think about this, we know the first trial we didn't put any baking powder. So no baking powder means no baking soda, means no carbon dioxide, right? So we can probably guess that the first ones might not rise very much because they're not going to expand. The second one we put a little baking powder, so that means a little bit of baking soda, which means this reaction is going to happen a little bit, so they might expand a little bit. And then round 3 we put a lot of baking powder. So you can probably guess a lot of baking powder means a lot of baking soda, means a lot of carbon dioxide, means a lot of bubbles, means it's going to expand a lot and it's going to take up a lot of space. The last ingredient was starch, which is basically a carbohydrate, and long story short, it's just a long chain of sugar molecules. All it really does in the baking powder is it keeps the acid in the base from reacting until we're ready. So it's just kind of stabilizer. Now the last thing that I wanted to talk about though is something that Crissy mentioned when she was making our biscuits for round 3. She noticed that the third round was much poofier, and it was almost like expanding more as she was working on it. And what might have been going on, we'll have to check and see if Crissy has single-acting or double-acting baking powder. Double-acting baking powder actually has 2 acids, and so it acts twice. And so it acts once before baking and once while baking. Maybe if it was double acting, it already had started to react and produce some CO2 bubbles to make our little baked item expand more. We've got our biscuits here. When you are experimenting and doing science of cooking, well, that's like the only test that really matters, right? Is how does it taste? Usually don't eat your science experiment, but in this case, it'll be fine. Take a bite out of one of those trial 1 biscuits and tell us what you think. It's not as bad as you're expecting. Can you describe kind of the texture of eating it and how it tastes?
It kind of tastes like a cracker.
Definitely dry.
So we did number 1.
At first it was okay, but then not so good. How do you describe the taste of baking powder? At first it's okay, and then it adjusts to your taste buds, and it's like, whoa, there's
Is it bitter?
It's bitter.
Well, there's only one test that remains, and that is round 2.
I'm excited about this one. Here I go. Delta biscuit.
All right, so did we succeed with round 2?
We definitely did.
Round 2 was like the correct ratio based on the recipe. Round 1 was no baking powder. Round 3 was twice as much baking powder as the recipe called for. That kind of shows us what the role of the baking powder is. We can definitely tell that it fluffed it up and it, poofed it out and made it take up more space. But one side effect of poofing out too much is that you have a bunch of leftover baking powder in there, and you get maybe more carbonic acid than you really wanted, which means you get more of the CO2 than you really wanted. And remember, we only changed one thing. We changed how much baking powder we put in. If we had said, okay, we're going to put 3/4 of a cup of milk in this one, and also change the baking powder, and also change the amount of sugar, it would be all over the place, and we couldn't really say, well, the baking powder does this or the milk does that, because there's too much going on. So Crissy, what could we do if I wanted to know, well, how does the amount of milk affect the recipe?
I think that if you wanted to do that, then you would have to change your one variable. So instead of changing the amount of baking powder and the amount of milk, you would keep the same amount of baking powder and then only change the milk. And I think you could do that with
We could do that with the amount of milk,
things, right?
We could do it with the amount of sugar, we could do it with the amount of salt, we could do it with the amount of butter, we could do it with the amount of flour. We could also do it with how long we cook it. So we might try one where you can only cook it for 6 minutes, and then you cook it for 12, and then you cook it for 18.
Thank you so much, Juney, or Mr. Shober, so much for coming and visiting with us and teaching us an amazing science experiment in the kitchen. And I just want to challenge all of y'all after your experiment to maybe share with your parents, maybe with a sibling, try it out and see what as well. So if you do the experiment, make sure to take a picture of it and tag us on Instagram or Facebook.
And let us know how your biscuits turned out.
Thank you so much, and we will see you next time. Bye.